The scar running down Tessa Zimmerman's face had been put there by her own father's hand when she was 16 years old, and in the 7 years since, she had learned to accept that no man would ever want a woman marked as damaged goods in Park City, Utah territory. She kept her head down as she walked through the dusty streets that hot July morning in 1878, carrying her basket of fresh bread to deliver to the general store. The sun beat mercilessly on the wooden buildings lining Main Street, and she could hear the familiar sounds of horses neighing and men conducting their business. Tessa had grown accustomed to being invisible, to moving through life like a ghost nobody wanted to acknowledge beyond what services she could provide with her baking skills. The scar was not her only mark of shame in the eyes of the townspeople. Her father had been a drunk who gambled away every cent the family had before he died in a bar fight 3 years ago. Her mother had passed from fever when Tessa was just 19, leaving her alone in a world that already thought poorly of her. The small house on the edge of town where she lived and ran her baking business was all she had left, and she clung to it with desperate determination. As she pushed open the door to Mitchell's general store, the bell above chimed cheerfully, a sound that felt at odds with the way Mrs. Mitchell's face tightened upon seeing her. "Just leave them on the counter," the older woman said curtly, not bothering with pleasantries. "Payment's there in the envelope." Tessa nodded silently, setting down her basket and taking the small envelope. She did not count it. There was no point. If it was short, what could she do? Complain? Risk losing one of her few steady customers? She simply tucked it into her apron pocket and turned to leave. That was when she collided with what felt like a solid wall of muscle and leather. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her before she could fall backward. "Whoa there, miss. You all right?" Tessa's head snapped up, and she found herself staring into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man towering over her had to be at least 6 feet tall, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn cowboy hat. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, and when he smiled at her with genuine concern, she felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest. Then she remembered herself and quickly ducked her head, turning the scarred side of her face away from him. "I am fine, thank you." She tried to pull away, but his hands remained gentle but firm on her arms. "You sure? I came in like a bull, not watching where I was going." "I said I am fine," Tessa repeated, more forcefully this time, and finally managed to extract herself from his grip. She hurried toward the door, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the collision and everything to do with the warmth she had seen in those blue eyes before she had hidden her face. "What's your name?" the stranger called after her. Tessa did not answer. She pushed through the door and out into the bright sunlight, walking as quickly as she could without actually running. Behind her, she heard Mrs. Mitchell's disapproving voice explaining something to the stranger, and Tessa's stomach churned with humiliation. No doubt the woman was telling him all about poor scarred Tessa Zimmerman, the baker who lived alone and would die alone. She made it halfway down the street before she heard boots on the wooden walkway behind her. "Miss, wait up a moment." Tessa stopped, closing her eyes briefly. Why could he not just leave her alone? She turned slowly, keeping the right side of her face angled away. "What do you want?" The cowboy had followed her out of the store, and now he stood a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. Up close and in better light, she could see he was probably around 25 or 26, with a strong jaw and a slight cleft in his chin. Everything about him spoke of strength and capability, from his broad shoulders to the confident way he carried himself. "I wanted to apologize properly for nearly knocking you over," he said, "and to introduce myself. I am James Walker, but folks call me Jace. I just signed on as foreman at the Patterson Ranch." Tessa swallowed hard. The Patterson Ranch was the largest cattle operation in the territory, sprawling across thousands of acres just outside of Park City. For this man to be made foreman at such a young age, he had to be exceptional at what he did. "Apology accepted," she said stiffly. "Good day, Mr. Walker." "You never told me your name," he said as she started to turn away again. "That is because I did not intend to," Tessa replied, and this time she did walk away quickly, her skirts swishing around her ankles as she navigated the crowded street back toward home. That night, alone in her small kitchen, Tessa could not stop thinking about the cowboy with the blue eyes. It was foolish, she told herself as she measured out flour for the next day's bread. Men like that did not give women like her a second glance, not once they saw the damage. The scar that ran from her left temple down through her eyebrow and across her cheek to her jaw was impossible to hide, a permanent reminder of the night her father had struck her with his belt buckle in a drunken rage. She touched the raised tissue gently, feeling the familiar roughness beneath her fingertips. For a moment, just a brief moment after looking into Jace Walker's eyes, she had felt something she thought she had buried long ago. Hope. But hope was dangerous for women like her. Hope led to disappointment, and she had experienced enough of that to last a lifetime. The next morning brought another round of deliveries. Tessa loaded her wagon with bread, pies, and sweet rolls, hitching up her old mare Daisy for the journey to the various businesses and homes that had placed orders. It was a familiar routine, one that usually brought her a measure of peace. Today, however, she found herself scanning the streets nervously, half expecting to see Jace Walker around every corner. She was delivering an order to the boarding house when she heard his voice again. "Morning, Miss Zimmerman." Tessa nearly dropped the pies she was carrying. She turned to find Jace leaning against the hitching post near her wagon, stroking Daisy's nose gently. The old mare, who usually shied away from strangers, was nuzzling his hand contentedly. "How do you know my name?" Tessa asked, then immediately felt foolish. Of course he knew. Mrs. Mitchell had no doubt told him everything. "Asked around," Jace said simply. "Heard you make the best bread in the territory, thought I might place an order for the ranch. We have got 20 men who would appreciate some good baking." Tessa stared at him suspiciously. "The ranch is 7 miles outside of town. I do not deliver that far." "I could come pick it up every week," Jace offered. "Every Saturday morning, say, we would pay well." It was a generous offer, one Tessa could not really afford to refuse. Business had been slow lately, with more families baking their own bread as money grew tighter. The income from such a large weekly order would make a real difference. "Fine," she said finally. "Saturdays. Be here at dawn and the order will be ready." "Dawn it is," Jace agreed, that easy smile spreading across his face again. "Looking forward to it, Miss Zimmerman." Tessa watched him tip his hat to her before striding away down the street, and she could not shake the feeling that she had just agreed to something far more complicated than a simple business transaction. Saturday came too quickly. Tessa had been up half the night baking, preparing 20 loaves of her finest bread along with cinnamon rolls and berry pies. She told herself the extra effort was simply good business practice. But deep down she knew she was trying to impress someone who should not matter to her. Jace arrived precisely at dawn, driving a small wagon. The smile that lit his face when he saw the spread she had prepared made Tessa's heart skip a beat. "This looks amazing," he said, carefully loading the baked goods into his wagon. "The men are going to think they died and went to heaven." "Just be sure they know there is an order for next week as well," Tessa said, trying to keep her voice businesslike. "I need the steady work." "Already planned on it," Jace assured her. He paused before climbing back onto the wagon seat. "Miss Zimmerman, Would you consider having breakfast with me sometime? There is a nice little restaurant down by the depot." Tessa's hand instinctively went to her face, covering the scar. "No, thank you." "Why not?" Jace asked, and his tone was genuinely curious, not offended. "Because I know what I am," Tessa said quietly. "And I know what people think when they see me. I have made my peace with it, Mr. Walker. You should make yours and stop asking me questions I cannot answer." She turned and went back into her house, closing the door firmly behind her. Through the window, she watched him stand there for a long moment before finally climbing onto his wagon and driving away. The weekly deliveries continued through the rest of July and into August. Every Saturday, Jace would arrive at dawn to collect the order, and every Saturday he would try to engage Tessa in conversation. She kept her responses short and professional, but she found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that frightened her. He told her about his life anyway, whether she asked or not. How he had grown up on a ranch in Texas, learning to rope and ride before he could read. How his parents had died of cholera when he was 18, leaving him and his younger sister Emily alone. How he had worked his way across cattle drives and ranches for 7 years, saving every penny he could until he had enough to bring Emily out to live with a respectable family in Salt Lake City, while he worked to build a future for them both. "She is 16 now," Jace said one Saturday morning in late August as he loaded the bread. "Smart as a whip and determined to become a teacher. I am real proud of her." Tessa found herself smiling despite herself. "That is admirable, Mr. Walker. Not many brothers would sacrifice so much for their sisters." "Family is everything," Jace said simply. "Which is why I cannot figure out why yours did not protect you better." The words hung in the air between them. Tessa stiffened, her hand moving toward her face again. "You do not know anything about my family." "I know your father was a drunk who hurt you," Jace said quietly. "I know your mother died and left you alone. I know this town treats you like you are something to be ashamed of when you should be celebrated." "Celebrated?" Tessa laughed bitterly. "For what? Being marked? Being damaged?" "For surviving," Jace said, his blue eyes intense. "For building a business with your own 2 hands. For getting up every morning and facing a world that has not been kind to you with grace and dignity." Tessa felt tears prickling at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "Please stop." "Stop what?" "Stop being kind to me," she whispered. "Stop looking at me like I am something worth looking at. Stop making me think about things that can never be." Jay stepped closer slowly, like he was approaching a skittish horse. "What things, Tessa?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips sent a shiver through her. "Things like someone caring about me, things like not being alone, things like love." "And why can those things never be?" Jace asked gently. Tessa finally looked directly at him, letting him see the full extent of the scar that marred her face. "Because look at me. I am unlovable. I accepted that a long time ago." Jace reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and cupped her scarred cheek with his calloused hand. His thumb traced the line of the scar gently, and his eyes never left hers. "Then you have not met me yet," he said softly. "Let me prove you wrong." Tessa felt something break open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she had forgotten it existed. "I do not understand." "I am saying I think you are beautiful," Jace said. "I am saying I have been looking for a reason to come into town every week since the moment I met you. I am saying I want to court you properly if you will let me." "Why?" The word came out as barely more than a breath. "Because you are strong and talented and kind," Jace said. "Because you make the best cinnamon rolls I have ever tasted. Because when you smile, which is not nearly often enough, it lights up your whole face. Because that scar does not define you, no matter what this narrow-minded town thinks. Tessa pulled away from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself. You do not know what you are asking. Being associated with me, it will make people talk. It could affect your position at the ranch. Let them talk, Jace said firmly. And Mr. Patterson is a fair man. He cares about how I do my job, not who I spend my time with. He paused, then added more softly, but I will not push you into anything you do not want, Tessa. If you truly want me to leave you alone, I will. Just say the word. Tessa looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but sincerity in his eyes. Part of her wanted to send him away, to protect herself from the inevitable hurt that would come when he realized what a mistake he had made. But another part of her, the part that had been lonely for so long, was crying out for her to take this chance. One breakfast, she heard herself say. That is all I am promising. The smile that broke across Jace's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. One breakfast. Tomorrow morning. I will pick you up at 8, Tessa nodded, not trusting herself to speak again. After Jace left, she went back inside and sank into a chair, wondering what she had just agreed to and terrified of the hope blooming in her chest. The next morning, Tessa changed her dress 3 times before finally settling on a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She had never been vain before, but suddenly, she found herself caring about her appearance in a way she had not in years. She braided her hair carefully, leaving it to hang over her left shoulder where it partially covered the scar. When Jace arrived in his wagon, cleaned and polished for the occasion, he was wearing a fresh shirt and his best hat. He helped her up onto the seat with old-fashioned courtesy, and Tessa felt the eyes of her neighbors watching as they drove through town toward the restaurant. The Depot restaurant was a modest establishment that served hearty meals to travelers passing through on the stagecoach. Tessa had never eaten there, never had reason to. As they walked in together, she felt the curious stares of the other patrons and had to resist the urge to turn and flee. Jace seemed to sense her discomfort. He placed his hand lightly on the small of her back, guiding her to a table by the window. The touch was reassuring, grounding her. "Coffee?" the waitress asked, appearing beside their table. She was a woman Tessa recognized from church, though they had never spoken. The woman's eyes widened slightly when she saw Tessa, but to her credit, she kept her expression neutral. "Please," Jace said, "and we will take whatever your breakfast special is today." After the waitress left, Tessa fidgeted with her napkin. "I do not know what to talk about." "Anything you want," Jace said easily. "Tell me about your baking. How did you learn?" Tessa relaxed slightly. This was safer ground. "My mother taught me. She was an excellent baker. When she got sick, I took over making extra to sell. It was the only way we could afford her medicine." She paused, the old grief rising up. It was not enough in the end. "I am sorry," Jace said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made Tessa's throat tighten. "It was 4 years ago," she said. "I have learned to manage alone." "You should not have to," Jace said. "Manage alone, I mean. Everyone needs someone." "That is a nice sentiment," Tessa replied, more sharply than she intended. "But not everyone has that option." The waitress returned with their coffee and breakfast plates piled high with eggs, bacon, and biscuits with gravy. For a few minutes they ate in silence, and Tessa began to relax despite herself. The food was good, and there was something oddly comfortable about sitting across from Jace, even without conversation. "Can I ask you something?" Jace said finally. Tessa tensed. "I suppose." "Do you ever let yourself be happy? Or do you punish yourself for something that was not your fault?" The question hit too close to home. Tessa set down her fork carefully. "That is not a fair question." "Maybe not," Jace acknowledged, "but I have been watching you for weeks now, Tessa. You work yourself to the bone, you keep your head down, you do not let anyone get close. That is not living. That is just existing. And what would you have me do? Tessa asked, feeling her defenses rising. Walk around pretending I do not see the way people look at me. Pretend that I have the same chances as any other woman in this territory. No, Jace said firmly. I would have you recognize that you are worth more than what those small-minded fools think. I would have you see yourself the way I see you. And how is that? Tessa challenged. Jace leaned forward, his eyes intense. As someone remarkable, as someone who has faced hardship and come through it stronger, as someone I want to know better if you will give me the chance. Tessa felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. You do not know me well enough to say that. Then let me get to know you, Jace said. That is all I am asking. Give me a chance to prove that not everyone in this world is going to hurt you. Tessa looked down at her plate, her mind warring with her heart. Finally, she said quietly, I am afraid. Of what? Of believing you. Of letting my guard down. Of getting hurt again. She forced herself to meet his eyes. My father told me I was worthless every day of my life. When he gave me this scar, he said I should be grateful because now my outside matched my inside, that I was ugly through and through. Jace's jaw tightened and she saw anger flash in his eyes, but when he spoke, his voice was gentle. Your father was wrong about all of it. How can you be so sure? Because I am looking at you right now and I see someone beautiful, someone brave. Someone who deserves every good thing this world has to offer. He reached across the table, palm up, offering his hand. Let me prove it to you, one day at a time. Tessa stared at his hand for a long moment. Taking it would mean opening herself up to possibilities she had long since closed off. It would mean risk and vulnerability and the potential for heartbreak. But looking into Jace's steady blue eyes, she found herself wanting to be brave enough to try. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and something in Tessa's chest that had been frozen for years began to thaw. One day at a time, she whispered. Over the following weeks, Jace courted Tessa with a patience and persistence that slowly wore down her defenses. He showed up at her door on Sunday mornings to walk her to church, ignoring the scandalized whispers. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, which she arranged in a jar on her kitchen windowsill. He sat in her kitchen while she worked, telling her stories about the ranch and his life, gradually coaxing her to share her own stories in return. He learned that she loved to read but rarely bought books because they were expensive. The next week, he showed up with a stack of novels borrowed from Mrs. Patterson's library. He discovered that she had never learned to ride properly and offered to teach her, spending patient hours in the corral behind her house while she learned to handle his gentle mare. Slowly, Tessa began to believe that maybe, just maybe, Jace was sincere. He never flinched from her scar, never looked away from it or pretended it was not there. Sometimes he would trace it gently with his fingers, and the tender way he touched her made Tessa feel cherished instead of damaged. But the town was not kind about their courtship. Tessa heard the whispers when she walked down the street. She saw the disapproving looks from the women at church. One afternoon in September, she overheard two women talking outside the general store. I cannot imagine what that Walker boy sees in her, one said. Scarred like that and with her background, he could do so much better. Men have strange tastes sometimes, the other replied. He will realize his mistake soon enough. Tessa hurried away before they could see her, but the words cut deep. That evening, when Jace came to call on her, she was distant and quiet. What is wrong? He asked, settling into the chair at her kitchen table where he had claimed his usual spot. Nothing, Tessa lied, kneading bread dough with more force than necessary. Tessa. His voice was patient but firm. We said we would be honest with each other. She stopped kneading and gripped the edge of the table. I heard some women talking today about us, about what a poor choice I am for you. Jace stood and crossed to her, turning her gently to face him. And you believed them, Tessa struggled to find the words. They are right, Jace. You could have any woman in this territory, someone pretty and respected and whole. I do not want any other woman, Jace said firmly. I want you. When are you going to believe that? I am trying, Tessa said, her voice breaking. But it is hard when everyone keeps telling me I am not good enough for you. Jace cupped her face in both hands, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. I do not care what anyone in this town thinks. I care about you. Your strength, your kindness, your brilliant mind, and your talented hands. The way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. The way you laugh when you finally let yourself relax. That is what matters to me. But your reputation, Tessa protested weakly. My reputation is my own concern, Jace said. And anyone who has a problem with the woman I have chosen to spend my time with can take it up with me directly. He paused, then added more softly, Do you want to stop seeing me? Is that what you are trying to say? No, Tessa said immediately, surprising herself with the vehemence of her response. No, I do not want that. Then what do you want? Tessa took a shaky breath. I want to believe this is real. I want to stop waiting for you to wake up and realize you have made a terrible mistake. I want to trust that you mean everything you have been saying to me. I do mean it, Jace said. Every word. And I will keep saying it as many times as you need to hear it until you believe me. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, then another to the scar on her cheek. You are not a mistake, Tessa Zimmerman. You are a gift. Tessa felt the last of her resistance crumble. She wrapped her arms around Jace's waist and let herself lean into his strength, feeling his arms come around her in return. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. The weather turned cooler as September gave way to October. Tessa found herself spending more time at the Patterson ranch, invited by Mrs. Patterson herself, after Jace had apparently spoken to his employers about the serious nature of his intentions toward her. The older woman, a kind-faced lady in her 50s, welcomed Tessa warmly and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. Jace speaks very highly of you, Mrs. Patterson said one afternoon over tea in her comfortable parlor. He is a good man, one of the best foremen we have ever had. I am glad he has found someone to care for. Tessa ducked her head, still unused to being spoken of with such regard. He has been very kind to me. Kind nothing, Mrs. Patterson said with a gentle laugh. That boy is head over heels in love with you, my dear. Anyone with eyes can see it. The words made Tessa's heart race. She and Jace had not spoken of love yet, though the feeling had been growing in her chest for weeks now, terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. That evening, Jace took her on a ride to a spot overlooking the valley. The autumn sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter to come. They sat on a blanket Jace had brought, looking out over the vast expanse of land. My sister is coming to visit next month, Jace said. I would like you to meet her. Tessa felt a flutter of nervousness. Are you certain? What if she does not approve of me? She will love you, Jace said confidently. But even if she did not, which she will, it would not change how I feel about you. And how do you feel about me? Tessa asked quietly. Jace turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I love you, Tessa. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you in that general store, and every day since has only made me more certain. You are everything I never knew I was looking for. Tessa felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were tears of happiness. I love you too. I was afraid to admit it, afraid it would make losing you hurt more when you left, but I cannot help it. I am not going anywhere, Jace promised. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I am a man who knows his own mind. Tessa Zimmerman, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are loved?" Tessa stared at the ring, her mind reeling. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but years of self-doubt held her back. "Jace, are you absolutely sure? There is no going back from this. People will always talk." "Let them talk," Jace said. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." "You are my future, Tessa. Say yes." Tessa looked into his eyes and saw nothing but love and certainty staring back at her. She thought about the lonely years she had spent convincing herself she was unlovable, and then she thought about the past few months with Jace, learning to see herself through his eyes, learning to believe she might be worthy of love after all. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Jace slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. "I am going to make you so happy," Jace promised. "Every single day for the rest of our lives." "You already do," Tessa said, and realized with wonder that it was true. The engagement was met with mixed reactions in Park City. Many of the townspeople were skeptical or disapproving, but there were also some pleasant surprises. Mrs. Patterson threw a small engagement party at the ranch, inviting several families from the surrounding area. To Tessa's amazement, people were kind to her, congratulating them both and welcoming her into their community. "Pay no mind to the gossips," one rancher's wife told her. "What matters is that you two are happy together. Everything else is just noise." Jace's sister Emily arrived in early November, and Tessa was nervous about meeting her. But the 16-year-old girl hugged Tessa warmly upon introduction and immediately began chattering about the wedding plans. "I am so happy Jace found you," Emily confided during a private moment while Jace was talking with Mr. Patterson about ranch business. "He has been alone for so long, working so hard for my sake. He deserves someone wonderful." "I am not sure I am wonderful," Tessa said hesitantly. Emily gave her a shrewd look. "My brother thinks you are, and he is the best judge of character I know. Besides, I can see how happy you make him. He smiles all the time now. He never used to do that." The wedding was planned for December, a small affair at the church in Park City. Tessa made her own dress, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored wool. Mrs. Patterson helped with the arrangements, opening her home for the reception afterward. The night before the wedding, Tessa stood in her little house, looking around at the place that had been her refuge for so long. Tomorrow she would move to the small foreman's cottage at the Patterson Ranch, starting her new life as Mrs. James Walker. The thought filled her with a mixture of excitement and terror. There was a soft knock at the door, and Tessa opened it to find Jace standing there with a sheepish expression. "I know it is bad luck to see you before the wedding," he said, "but I needed to make sure you were not having second thoughts." "Are you?" Tessa asked. "Not even for a second," Jace said firmly, "but I know you. I know you overthink things and talk yourself out of good things because you do not think you deserve them." Tessa smiled because he was right and they both knew it. "I am not having second thoughts. I am nervous, but I want this. I want you." Jace stepped inside and took her hands. "Tomorrow, when you walk down that aisle, there is going to be a lot of people watching, some of them hoping we fail. But I need you to look only at me, understand? Look at my face and remember that I love you more than anything in this world." "I will," Tessa promised. "And Tessa," Jace added, "you are going to be the most beautiful bride anyone in this territory has ever seen." The next morning dawned cold and clear, perfect December weather. Emily helped Tessa dress and arrange her hair, chattering excitedly the whole time. When Tessa looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were bright with happiness, and for once when she looked at the scar on her face, she did not see damage. She saw survival. She saw strength. The church was nearly full when Tessa arrived. She had expected only a handful of people, but it seemed half the town had turned out, along with all the families from the surrounding ranches. As she walked down the aisle alone, having no one to give her away, she heard the whispers and saw the curious stares. But then she found Jace's eyes, exactly as he had told her to do, and nothing else mattered. He was standing at the altar in his best suit, and the look on his face took her breath away. There was such love and pride in his expression, such certainty that Tessa felt the last of her doubts melt away. This man loved her, truly loved her, and she loved him in return. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Jace spoke in a clear, strong voice that carried through the church. I, James Walker, take you, Tessa Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, protect you, and remind you every day of how remarkable you are. I promise to be your partner in all things, your comfort in hard times and your companion in joy. From this day forward, you will never be alone again. Tessa's voice shook as she made her own vows, but she got through them, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jace kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the congregation sighed audibly. The reception at the Patterson Ranch was lively and warm. People who had never spoken to Tessa before came up to congratulate her and welcome her to the community. She realized that by marrying Jace, by having someone publicly declare that she was worthy of love and commitment, she had somehow become acceptable in a way she never had been before. It made her both grateful and a little sad for the years she had spent in isolation. But those thoughts faded as Jace pulled her into a dance, spinning her around the Pattersons' large parlor while a fiddler played. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years, and when she caught sight of their reflection in a window, she saw not a damaged woman and the man who had made a mistake, but two people who were genuinely, completely happy. That night, in the foreman's cottage that was now their home, Jace made love to Tessa with a gentleness and passion that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, she felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Jace murmured, stroking her hair. "For not giving up on me, for seeing something in me worth loving." Jace shifted so he could look into her eyes. "Tessa, you have it backward. You are the one who gave me a gift. You let me prove that love is about seeing someone fully and choosing them anyway. Every single day I choose you." "I choose you too," Tessa said, and kissed him again. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Tessa continued her baking, but now she worked from the larger kitchen in their cottage and had Jace's help with deliveries. The weekly orders from the ranch hands continued, and word spread about her skills. Soon, she was getting orders from as far away as Salt Lake City, with people willing to pay premium prices for her breads and pies. Emily came to stay with them for 2 weeks during Christmas, and the three of them formed an easy, comfortable family unit. Tessa taught Emily some of her baking techniques, and they grew close in a way that filled some of the empty spaces in both their hearts. "You are good for him," Emily told Tessa one evening while they washed dishes together. "I have not seen my brother this happy since before our parents died." "He is good for me too," Tessa replied. "I did not think I could be this happy." Spring brought new life to the ranch and to Tessa's heart. She discovered she was pregnant in April, and the joy on Jace's face when she told him was something she would treasure forever. "A baby," he kept saying, his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Tessa asked, though the answer was obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Jace said. He pulled her close. You are giving me everything, Tessa. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just work. I love you so much. The pregnancy was not easy. Tessa suffered from severe morning sickness for the first few months, and Jace hovered over her constantly, worried despite the doctor's assurances that everything was progressing normally. Mrs. Patterson was a font of advice and support, and several of the ranch wives who had initially been skeptical of Tessa now came around with hand-me-down baby clothes and offers of help. In November of 1879, after a long and difficult labor, Tessa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas James Walker, and from the moment Jace held his son in his arms, Tessa knew that whatever hardships life might bring, they would face them together as a family. "He is perfect," Jace whispered, his eyes wet with tears as he looked down at the tiny baby. "Just like his mother." "Hardly perfect," Tessa said with a tired laugh. "But ours." "Ours," Jace agreed, and leaned down to kiss first his son's forehead, then his wife's lips. The years that followed were full of joy and occasional hardship, as all lives are. Thomas grew into a strong, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quiet determination. When he was 3, Tessa gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Daniel and Sarah. The foreman's cottage, which had seemed so spacious when Tessa first moved in, suddenly felt cramped with 3 small children racing through it. When the twins were 6 months old, Mr. Patterson approached Jace with an offer. The ranch was expanding, and he wanted Jace to become a full partner, managing half the operation. The offer came with a larger house and a significant share of the profits. It was an opportunity Jace had been working toward his entire life. That night, after the children were in bed, Jace and Tessa sat on the porch of their cottage, watching the stars come out over the prairie. "This is everything I have been working for," Jace said. "But it means more responsibility, longer hours. I want to make sure you are all right with it." "Of course I am," Tessa said. "You have earned this, Jace. Mr. Patterson would not offer it if he did not think you were capable." "It means we will have more," Jace continued. "More security for the children, more opportunities for their futures. I can bring Emily out here permanently if she wants, once she finishes her teaching certificate. Maybe even build a schoolhouse on ranch property." Tessa smiled, thinking of how far they had both come. "It sounds wonderful." "But Jace, even if we never had more than we have right now, I would be happy. You gave me everything when you gave me your love." Jace pulled her close. "And you gave me a home, not just a house, but a real home with people who love me. I will never stop being grateful for the day I walked into Mitchell's General Store and ran into the most stubborn, beautiful woman in the territory." "Stubborn," Tessa teased. "Incredibly stubborn," Jace confirmed. "Took me weeks to get you to even talk to me properly." "I was protecting myself," Tessa said, more seriously now. "I know," Jace said. "And I do not blame you for that, but I am glad you eventually took a chance on me." "Best decision I ever made," Tessa said, and kissed her husband under the vast Utah sky. They moved into the larger house that spring of 1883, a beautiful home with enough rooms for their growing family and any future additions. Emily did come to live with them, having completed her teaching certificate, and true to Jace's vision, they built a small schoolhouse on ranch property. Emily taught not just the Walker children, but also the children of the ranch workers and neighboring families, creating a real sense of community. Tessa's baking business continued to flourish. She now employed 2 local women to help with the larger orders, and her reputation had spread far beyond Park City. She even received an order once from the territorial governor, a moment of pride that made Jace beam with satisfaction. But more important than the business success, or the beautiful home or the partnership in the ranch, was the family they had built together. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who worshipped his father and was protective of his younger siblings. The twins were a handful, constantly into mischief, but bright and loving. In 1885, Tessa gave birth to another daughter named Grace, and Jace declared their family complete. 4 children, he said, holding baby Grace while his other children clamored for attention around him. We have been blessed beyond measure. The old whispers about Tessa's scar and her past had long since faded. She was now known as Mrs. Walker, the foreman's wife, an excellent baker and a good mother. Young women in town sometimes came to her for advice, and she found herself in the surprising position of being looked up to in the community. One day in the summer of 1890, Tessa was working in her kitchen when a young woman came to the door. She was thin and nervous, with a black eye that makeup could not quite hide. Mrs. Walker. The woman said hesitantly, "My name is Catherine. I heard that you might understand what it is like to have a hard life." Tessa's heart ached with recognition. She invited the woman in and made her tea, listening as Catherine poured out her story of an abusive husband and no way to escape. It was like looking into a mirror of her own past. "What should I do?" Catherine asked finally. "Everyone says a wife should stay with her husband no matter what." "But I am so afraid." Tessa thought carefully before answering. "I cannot tell you what to do, but I can tell you that you deserve to be safe. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, and I can tell you that there are people who will help you if you are brave enough to ask." With Jace's support, Tessa helped Catherine find a place to stay and connected her with a lawyer in Salt Lake City who helped women in difficult situations. It was the beginning of what would become Tessa's quiet mission, helping women who found themselves in circumstances similar to what she had experienced. She never advertised what she did, but word spread in the way it does among women who need help. Over the years, dozens of women came to her door, and she gave them advice, connections, and sometimes just a listening ear and a safe place to stay for a night or two. Jace supported her fully in this work, understanding that it was her way of transforming her own painful past into something meaningful. By the time Tessa turned 40 in 1897, she looked back on her life with a sense of amazement. The scared, lonely young woman who had believed herself unlovable seemed like a different person entirely. She had a husband who adored her, 4 thriving children, a successful business, and meaningful work helping others. She had friends and respect and love in abundance. One evening, she and Jace sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Their children were grown now, Thomas preparing to take over more of the ranch operations, the twins pursuing their own interests, and Grace showing a talent for teaching that reminded them of Emily. "You ever regret it?" Tessa asked suddenly. "Regret what?" Jace asked, though he suspected he knew what she meant. "Choosing me. I know your life would have been easier if you had picked someone else, someone without all my baggage." Jace turned to look at his wife, seeing the beautiful, confident woman she had become. The scar was still there, a silver line across her face, but it was just one part of her story now, not the defining feature. "Tessa Walker, I have not regretted a single moment since the day I met you," he said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Our life together, our children, everything we have built, it is all more than I ever dreamed possible. And I would choose you again, every single time." Tessa leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the deep contentment that came from being truly known and truly loved. "I never thought I could be this happy. That day in the general store when I ran into you, I wanted nothing more than to hide. I was so certain I did not deserve anything good. And I was certain I had just met the woman I was going to marry," Jace said. Even though you tried your best to avoid me, Tessa laughed. I did try very hard, did I not? You did, Jace agreed. But I can be pretty stubborn too when I want something. Thank goodness for that, Tessa said. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the sky. Inside the house, they could hear Grace practicing piano while Emily read to some of the ranch children who had stayed late. It was the sound of home, of family, of a life well lived. You proved me wrong, you know, Tessa said quietly. About what? About being unlovable. You said you would prove me wrong, and you spent every day since doing exactly that. Jace kissed the top of her head. You were never unlovable, sweetheart. You just had not met the right person yet. Someone who could see past the scars to the incredible woman underneath. And you were that person, Tessa said. I was lucky enough to be that person, Jace corrected, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for it. As the stars began to appear overhead, Tessa reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a scared, scarred young woman who believed she had no worth, to a wife, mother, businesswoman, and helper to others in need. It had not been an easy path, but it had been worth every difficult step. The summer of 1898 brought a surprise that made Tessa's happiness complete. Emily announced she was engaged to the new doctor who had arrived in Park City the previous fall. The wedding would be small but joyful, and Tessa was honored when Emily asked her to stand up as matron of honor. You have been like a mother to me, Emily said. More than that, you have been a friend. I cannot imagine getting married without you beside me. The wedding was beautiful, and watching Emily promise her life to a good man who clearly adored her, Tessa felt a sense of the circle completing. She had helped raise this young woman, had given her a stable home and love, and now Emily was starting her own family. That night, after the celebration had wound down and the newlyweds had departed, Tessa and Jace walked home under a full moon. 20 years, Jace said. 20 years since I convinced you to have breakfast with me. Has it really been that long? Tessa asked, though she knew it had been. 20 years of marriage, but it felt both longer and shorter than that. Longer because they had packed so much life into those years, and shorter because the time had passed so quickly. 20 of the best years of my life, Jace confirmed, and I am looking forward to at least 20 more. At least, Tessa agreed. By 1903, Thomas had married a rancher's daughter and given them 2 grandchildren. The twins were both married as well, Daniel to a teacher from Salt Lake City and Sarah to a young lawyer. Grace was 18 and already receiving attention from several young men in the county, much to Jace's protective dismay. Tessa found herself in the unexpected but welcome role of grandmother, and she took to it with the same dedication she had brought to everything else in her life. She baked cookies for her grandchildren and told them stories and made sure they knew they were loved unconditionally. One afternoon, her eldest grandchild, a girl of 6 named Lucy, traced the scar on Tessa's face with a curious finger. "How did you get that, Grandma?" she asked innocently. Tessa glanced at Jace, who was watching the interaction with interest. She had never hidden her scar, but she had also never discussed its origin with the children beyond vague references to an accident. "I got it a long time ago," Tessa said carefully. "When I was young and in a difficult situation." "Does it hurt?" Lucy asked. "Not anymore," Tessa said. "It used to hurt, but now it is just a reminder." "Of what?" Tessa thought about how to explain it in terms a child could understand. "It reminds me that even when bad things happen, we can survive them. We can become stronger, and we can find happiness even when we think we never will." "Like with Grandpa?" Lucy asked, clearly pleased with herself for making the connection. "Exactly like with Grandpa," Tessa said, smiling at Jace over the girl's head. Later, after Lucy had run off to play with her brother, Jace pulled Tessa into his arms. "That was well said," he told her. "It is the truth," Tessa replied. "That scar is part of my story, but it is not the whole story. The whole story includes you and our children and this beautiful life we have built together." "I love you," Jace said simply. "I love you too," Tessa replied. "More than I ever thought possible." The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and occasional sorrows. Mr. Patterson passed away in 1905, leaving Jace as full owner of the ranch in recognition of his years of dedicated service. Mrs. Patterson moved to Salt Lake City to live with her daughter, but she stayed in touch with the Walkers, and Tessa always sent her a box of baked goods for Christmas. Emily and her husband had 3 children, and the families remained close, gathering for holidays and celebrations. The schoolhouse Emily had started grew into a proper school with 2 teachers, serving the expanding community. Tessa's work helping women in difficult situations continued and expanded. She worked with churches in Salt Lake City to establish a proper refuge for women fleeing abuse, contributing both money and her time to the cause. It became her life's work outside of her family, and she found deep satisfaction in helping others find the same hope and healing she had discovered. In 1910, on the anniversary of their first breakfast together, Jace surprised Tessa with a trip to Salt Lake City. They stayed in a nice hotel and ate at fancy restaurants, and for a few days, they were just a man and a woman in love, without the responsibilities of the ranch or family pulling at them. "You remember that first breakfast?" Jace asked as they sat in a restaurant far fancier than the little place by the depot where they had eaten all those years ago. "I remember being terrified," Tessa said. "I kept waiting for you to look at me with disgust or pity, but you never did." "Because I never felt those things," Jace said. "I only felt fascination and attraction and hoped that you would give me a chance." "Best chance I ever took," Tessa said. "You know what I remember most from that day?" Jace asked. "What?" "The moment when you finally smiled. A real smile, not the polite ones you had been giving everyone. It transformed your whole face, and I thought to myself that I would spend the rest of my life trying to make you smile like that as often as possible." "You succeeded," Tessa said softly. "You gave me so many reasons to smile, Jace. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Jace corrected. "That is what real love is. Not one person saving another, but 2 people choosing to build a life together." They danced that night in the hotel ballroom, and as Jace spun her around the floor, Tessa caught sight of their reflection in the mirrors lining the walls. She saw a distinguished man in his 50s and a woman with silver streaking her hair, both of them clearly comfortable with each other in the way only long married couples can be. The scar was still there on her face, but it no longer defined her. She was so much more than that old wound now. By 1915, Tessa and Jace had 8 grandchildren, with another on the way. Their house was always full of noise and laughter, exactly as they liked it. Grace had married a rancher from a neighboring property, keeping her close, which pleased both her parents greatly. One late summer evening, Tessa was sitting on the porch shelling peas when a young woman approached the house hesitantly. She was clearly pregnant, probably around 6 months along, and she had a bruise on her arm that she tried to hide with her shawl. "Mrs. Walker," the woman said. "My name is Ruth. Someone in town said you might be able to help me." Tessa set aside her peas and stood, recognizing the fear and desperation in the young woman's eyes. "Come inside, dear. Let me make you some tea and we can talk." As Ruth poured out her story, another version of a tale Tessa had heard too many times, she felt Jace come to stand behind her, his hand resting supportively on her shoulder. Together they listened, and together they helped, just as they had done so many times over the years. Later that night, after Ruth had been set up in one of their guest rooms and promised help finding a safe situation, Tessa and Jace prepared for bed. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not run into you that day?" Jace asked. Tessa thought about it seriously. "I would probably still be in that little house on the edge of town, baking bread and existing but not really living, alone and convinced that was all I deserved." "I cannot imagine that," Jace said. "Cannot imagine a world where we did not find each other." "We almost did not," Tessa reminded him. "I tried very hard to push you away." "Lucky for both of us that I am stubborn," Jace said with a grin. "Lucky for both of us that you saw something in me worth fighting for," Tessa corrected. Jace pulled her into his arms, and even after all these years, the feeling of being held by him still made Tessa feel safe and cherished. "I saw everything in you worth fighting for, and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat." The next morning, Tessa woke early and went to the kitchen to start breakfast. Through the window, she could see the sun rising over the ranch, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. She heard Jace moving around upstairs, probably checking on Ruth to make sure she had slept well. From another part of the house came the sounds of one of their grandchildren who had stayed overnight, already awake and full of energy. This was her life now, full and busy and rich with love and purpose. So different from the lonely, frightened existence she had led before Jace Walker walked into Mitchell's general store and refused to be deterred by her attempts to hide. As she mixed batter for pancakes, Tessa found herself humming, something she did often these days. The girl who had thought she was unlovable had become a woman who was deeply loved and who loved deeply in return. The scar on her face was still there, but it had become just another part of her story, not the defining chapter. Jace came into the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her from behind, kissing the side of her neck in the familiar way he had done thousands of times over their years together. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured. "Good morning," Tessa replied, leaning back into his embrace. "I love you." "I love you too," Jace said. "Today and always." And standing there in their kitchen with the morning sun streaming through the windows and the sounds of family all around them, Tessa knew with absolute certainty that she had found something she had once believed impossible. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself. All because a stubborn cowboy had refused to believe she was unlovable and had spent every day since proving her wrong.